If somebody ever asks me about my favorite supervillain in the comics, the Rhino always comes to my mind. Maybe it has something to do with his low intelligence and his big heart. He originally became a villain not out of a thirst for power or madness, but simply to provide for his family. And unlike other villains who killed for fun, he doesn't kill unless he truly believes he has a good reason. One time, he and a few of his accomplices planned to rob a bank. During the robbery, Aleksei hit a guard to get him out of the way, but the guard landed on iron poles and died. When Aleksei found out, he panicked. This unintended death brought the Punisher after him, but Spider-Man managed to save him. After that, Aleksei wrote a message in broken English to the guard's wife. He claimed to be her husband's close friend, sent her money, and promised to send more every month. He also told her to write to him if she needed anything. Afterward, Aleksei decided to give up his criminal life. He walked into a bar in broad daylight, and when the police surrounded it, they told him his demands would be met if he kept everyone safe. Inside, Aleksei talked with the bartender and drank until his taste buds gave in. Then, he peacefully surrendered. Headlines read, "Drunken Rhino cages himself," but the public paid little attention due to the ongoing civil war. Aleksei described himself as a dumb animal that was finally locked away. His suit was painfully removed by S.H.I.E.L.D., symbolizing a new beginning. He said his trial lasted only 48 hours. He pled guilty to all charges, just wanting it to end. Due to his cooperation, he received a lenient sentence of 25 years. In prison, Aleksei kept to himself, didn't make friends, and refused to join any gangs or team up with anyone. In therapy, he consistently claimed he had changed and wanted to start a new life. However, no one, not even his therapist, believed him. During a prison break, almost all the inmates escaped, but Aleksei stayed behind. He was found calmly eating his food, asking if he could have more salt. When a police officer asked why he didn't flee, he simply replied that he doesn't quit what he started. Despite serving only a fraction of his sentence, his exemplary behavior, cooperation, and the need to make room for more dangerous criminals led to his early release. After getting out of prison, Aleksei gets off the bus and enters a small diner, where he meets a waitress named Oksana. Though she is kind to him, she is somewhat judgmental, noting that ex-prisoners like him rarely change. She speaks with a touch of ego, saying most ex-convicts always return to their old ways. Hurt but composed, Aleksei places money on the table and quietly leaves the diner. He rents a modest apartment and, despite encountering rude or dismissive people, remains polite and calm. But due to his criminal record, low intelligence, and lack of education, he struggles to find a job. Every application he submits is rejected. Frustrated, he eventually snaps at an interviewer, angrily declaring that he just wants to work and live like a normal man. This constant rejection leaves him desperate and on the verge of giving up, feeling that society will never fully accept him. One day, he meets Dr. Trauma, who tells him she sees his efforts to live a normal life and acknowledges his struggle. However, she insists that people like them can't truly change, saying they are monsters and denying that is foolishness. She attempts to exploit Aleksei's vulnerability, trying to lure him back into a life of crime to join her team because she made a new mechanical Rhino suit, far superior to his old one, which would greatly enhance his power. While Trauma speaks, Aleksei notices Oksana crying nearby and quickly excuses himself to check on her. She explains that she has lost her job at the diner. The two share a few light-hearted jokes before discussing the topic of criminals returning to their old ways. When Aleksei asks why they often do so, Oksana replies that it is because they stop. She shares a saying her grandfather used to tell her, "A man can live forever if he just puts one foot in front of the other and keeps moving forward." Moved by her words, Aleksei reflects that moving forward is the only thing he truly knows how to do. He asks Oksana to have dinner with him, adding that he doesn't want to live forever. He just wants to live. Their connection deepens, and eventually, Aleksei and Oksana marry, finding solace and happiness in each other. One morning, Aleksei is watching a documentary about how rhinos are solitary creatures and remain alone even during mating seasons. He dismisses it as nonsense. His wife, Oksana, brings him breakfast and teases him by feeding him with her own fork. The two are the happiest couple in the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Dr. Trauma, after failing to convince Aleksei to join her, finds another host to wear the Rhino suit and become the new Rhino. This new Rhino is brutal, powerful, and truly evil, but he feels unworthy of the title until he can ascend by killing the original Rhino. He studies his life, moves, and powers to identify his strengths and weaknesses. Back to Aleksei, who now works as a security guard hired by Peter Parker's friend, Nora. Peter is also working with her, and when he meets him for the first time, his spider sense goes off. Aleksei quickly explains that he's just a security guard for Nora. While they're talking, the new Rhino crashes into the casino, equipped with his mechanical suit and wielding a massive scythe. Aleksei immediately jumps into action, saving Peter and Nora from the collapsing wreckage, which surprises Peter and makes him start to believe Aleksei has truly changed. Aleksei calls for backup and requests medical units in case anyone is injured. The new Rhino shouts for Aleksei, demanding to speak with him. Aleksei, looking dejected, sighs and asks Nora and Peter to excuse him. He tells them to get to safety, adjusts his bow tie, and says he has to handle this issue, apologizing for ruining their evening. Peter also sneaks away to suit up as Spider-Man and prepare to assist. Aleksei confronts the new Rhino, who mocks him, saying he expected him to be fatter. Aleksei apologizes and claims the new Rhino must be mistaken. The new Rhino asks about his skin, referring to the suit. Aleksei calmly explains that he's not the person the new Rhino is looking for. Enraged, the new Rhino demands recognition as the true Rhino and insists on being acknowledged. Before Aleksei can finish speaking, the new Rhino strikes him, sending him flying across the room. Peter quickly jumps in and hurls a webbed-up piece of wreckage at the new Rhino. During the fight, Peter notices that the new Rhino's battle IQ isn't very high. He smashes 2 more wreckages at him and quips that he has the mental acuity of an avocado, sarcastically declaring him the true Rhino. Peter then returns to Aleksei, apologizing and assuring him he meant no offense. However, before they can talk further, the new Rhino lifts a horse and leaps toward them in an attack. Peter quickly saves Nora and evades the strike, but Aleksei stands his ground. The impact leaves Aleksei covered in blood and horse meat, with his suit torn apart. Aleksei bows his head and tells the new Rhino that it's over, acknowledging him as the new Rhino. He pleads with him to leave before anyone else gets hurt and asks to be left alone in peace. The new Rhino agrees to leave, but warns Aleksei to prepare for their next fight, as he intends to return and ascend by defeating him. On his way out, Spider-Man tries to stop him, but the new Rhino warns Peter to stay out of it, threatening that interfering will lead to blood on his hands as well. He uses his boosters to escape, sending Peter flying from the shockwave. Afterward, Aleksei asks to borrow a phone to call his wife. Later, he and Oksana file a police report. He isn't worried about himself, but fears for Oksana's safety. Watching them from afar, Peter reflects on how Aleksei has found true love and admits that he has changed. Knowing Aleksei's determination, Peter decides to track him using a spider tracer. On a cold night, Peter catches up to him, who hands the tracker back and asks Peter not to tell Oksana he was found without a jacket, as she would worry about his health. He shares that he tried to change, to leave his past behind, but it was incredibly difficult until he met Oksana. She became his light in the dark. She's rare and wonderful, and he feels blessed to have her. Aleksei admits he knows men like the new Rhino won't stop, and they got no honor, so he'll have to kill him to keep Oksana safe. With a grim determination, Aleksei declares he has his tools and will do whatever it takes to protect her. Peter warns him that if he returns to his old ways, he'll lose himself again, and with that, he'll lose Oksana too. When he asks why Peter cares, Peter confides that he's tired of losing people. Everyone around him seems to be dying, slipping away, or ruining their own lives, and he just wants someone he knows to win in life. He tells Aleksei that he'd like to see him win and urges him to leave the matter to the law and to him. At that moment, Oksana comes running out and hugs Aleksei tightly. He tells Peter that he'd do anything for her, even be a coward. He walks away with Oksana, thanking Peter for his help. Peter, in turn, thanks Aleksei for not returning to his old ways. After a few issues, while the new Rhino is training, he receives a call from Dr. Trauma. She tells him she knows where Aleksei is and has a way to make him wear the suit again. Meanwhile, Peter, Aleksei, Nora, and Oksana are all attending the U.S. naturalization ceremony. Peter notices a calm and smiling Aleksei, holding a bouquet of flowers and a love note he plans to give his wife. Peter is genuinely surprised by how kind Aleksei has become. Suddenly, an explosion occurs, and worry immediately spreads across Aleksei's face. The new Rhino bursts in, destroying everything in his path and sending anyone in his way flying. Peter quickly suits up and engages in a fight with him. He lands a few hits on the new Rhino's face, but when Peter attempts a punch to the body, the new suit proves too hard. The new Rhino grabs Peter, taunting that he is superior to the old Rhino and that Peter's tricks won't work on him. Jonah, furious at the chaos, orders the officers to open fire on both of them. Peter tries to warn them to stop, explaining that the new Rhino's armor is bulletproof, but they ignore him. The bullets deflect off the suit, going back toward the civilians. Aleksei, whose torn-up suit exposes his back, shields Nora and Oksana from the bullets. Despite his injuries, he asks his wife and Nora if they're okay. Peter Peter screams at him to run away with Oksana, but Aleksei, filled with anger, steps forward and addresses the new Rhino. He tells him that if he wants the honor of becoming the new Rhino and ascending, they should settle it like beasts at midnight, at the place where it all began. The new Rhino turns to Oksana and points at her, but before he could say anything, Aleksei interrupts and assures him that he will be there. Peter tells Aleksei there's no way he's letting them fight. He looks at Peter and solemnly says he made a promise. He then adds that the Rhino is dead, and he only said those things to make the new Rhino leave and stop hurting others. Before midnight, Spider-Man, along with a convoy of police cars and officers, was transferring Aleksei and Oksana to a protected hotel. Peter had even called in support from the Avengers to meet them at the hotel. However, as they traveled, Peter remembered Aleksei's words that the new Rhino has no honor. Suddenly, Peter sees a dozen civilians being thrown toward him. He quickly springs into action, webbing left and right, and even tying a web to his feet to catch and save everyone. As he rescues the last civilian, explosions erupt ahead. Panicked, Peter swings frantically toward the van where Aleksei and Oksana are, praying he'll make it in time. When he arrives, he's met with a heartbreaking sight. Aleksei cradling his wife amidst the fire, desperately calling her name, but she doesn't respond. Peter pleads with him to hand her over so he can rush her to a hospital, but he clutches her tightly. Speaking softly in Russian, he calls her his beloved and thanks her for loving him and turning him into a man, if only for a little while. Peter tries to reach out again, but Aleksei glares at him with a deathly stare and tells him that what happens next is Peter's fault. Later, he walks into a butcher shop. He places a stack of cash into the cash register, thanking the owner for his help and declaring their business finished. The man, having heard the news, tries to comfort Aleksei, but he cuts him off, telling him to leave and be with his loved ones. As the man departs, Aleksei stares at the old Rhino suit he once vowed never to wear again. Meanwhile, Peter, with webbed fists, confronts the new Rhino. With fury, he calls him a monster for what he did, shouting that Aleksei had moved on and was done with his old life. Peter punches the new Rhino so hard that it shatters a wall behind him, but the new Rhino retaliates with his scythe, sending Peter crashing into a nearby car. Suddenly, the ground begins to quake. Both Peter and the new Rhino look up to see a terrifying figure charging toward them, a demon-like version of the Rhino. It's Aleksei, but they both realize that the man he once was had died with his wife. The creature barreling toward them was no longer human. The two rhinos charge at each other with full throttle, the new Rhino declaring that his ascension is destined. Peter desperately calls out to Aleksei, pleading for him to stop, but his words fall on deaf ears. A massive explosion occurs upon their impact, sending shockwaves through the area. The new Rhino screams in agony, his legs broken and his suit shattered, as he cries out to God for help. Aleksei, with a demonic stare, looms over the injured Rhino, ready to finish the job. Peter tries to reason with him, telling Aleksei he understands what he has lost and that there is still a chance for redemption. But he tells Peter that all of this happened because he tried to be something he's not, and that he will never forgive Peter for it. Ignoring Peter's pleas, Aleksei charges at the new Rhino. Peter frantically webs him, trying to hold him back. The strain is immense. Aleksei's charge is so powerful that the road beneath him begins to crack, and Peter's suit starts to tear as his webbing snaps under the force. With a final devastating impact, Aleksei collides with the new Rhino, splitting his body into two and killing him instantly. As the dust settles, Aleksei disappears into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of destruction and an entire building in ruins. The aftermath leaves Peter broken for days. The new Rhino told him that he'll have blood on his hands if he interferes, which made Peter feel even more guilty. After a few hundred issues, when Ben Reilly returned as the Jackal, he created an artificial world and resurrected many, including Gwen, her father, Oksana, Dr. Connor's son and wife, and others, crafting the perfect world where everyone was reunited with their loved ones. The problem is that they were all just clones. Tragedy struck when a clone virus broke out, causing the clones to turn to ash and die. Aleksei held Oksana tightly as she turned to ash in his arms, her life slipping away once more. Devastated, he whispered that he had nothing left of her now, nothing but memories, and the crushing realization that he had failed to save her yet again. Meanwhile, Peter stood by Uncle Ben's grave, venting his frustrations and lamenting his struggles when he was interrupted by the sound of commotion outside. He rushed to find agents trying to subdue Aleksei, insisting he needed to be tested for the virus. Aleksei, furious and heartbroken, refused, shouting that he wouldn't leave Oksana. Peter quickly intervened, ordering everyone to back off and assuring them that he'll handle the situation. Peter told Aleksei that he might be infected and needed to get tested. Aleksei lashed out, screaming that Peter didn't understand his pain, that without Oksana, he was nothing. When she returned, he thought his life had finally turned around, but now, losing her again, had left him even less than nothing. Peter, visibly pained, admitted that he too had lost people that day. He acknowledged Aleksei's grief, explaining that the pain they felt was a testament to their love. He told Aleksei that those they lost lived on through their memories and actions, and they needed to honor them by becoming the people their loved ones would want them to be. When Aleksei asked how he was supposed to keep going, Peter replied that it was the same as always. Put his head down, put one foot in front of the other, and keep moving forward. Peter added that if Aleksei could do it, maybe he could do it too. After both were tested and cleared of infection, Peter wondered if they would truly be okay. Before parting ways, he asked Aleksei what he planned to do next. Aleksei responded that he would keep moving forward. Peter promised to check in on him later to see how he was holding up, and Aleksei said he'd do the same for Peter. With a mutual understanding, the two men exchanged farewells and went their separate ways.